WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute in Owings Mills. You've seen Cal up on the billboards, and you've heard me and my wife talking about all the things we're doing. My wife's planning for a half marathon and working with the Parisi folks and the great folks at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. Also, our friends at Cole Roofing and Gordian Energies. I'm wearing the hat right now on the web stream, but I've got a guy on right now who is one of my oldest, dearest friends, and I think we're about to have what they would call in the old days a point counterpoint. Correct, Kevin Cowherd? The book is When the Crowd Didn't Roar, How Baseball's Strangest Game Ever Gave a Broken City Hope. Kevin's been my friend for as long as you used to be old enough to be my big brother and uncle. Now we're contemporaries, I think. I'm 50 now, Kev, but I still remember that Burke's beer you bought me in the ice-cold frosted Mick and the onion rings and the crab melts, man. And now this book, it hit my desk, and I said, you know what? I'm going to take a breather. I'm going to have Kevin on. He's going to explain this whole thing to me. So welcome in. Happy New Year. Happy opening day to you, my brother.
It's great to talk to you, buddy. And you talk about Burke's. What great memories we have of that place. You and me going down there. That was a lot of fun.
It's now a Royal Farm, so I stop in. That's where I get my fried chicken and stuff like that. But I would sell my soul. I should talk to Frank Schilling and the folks. If there's some way that they could replicate the onion rings with the pastry box and the stamp on the top.
Yeah.
If Royal Farms could just have onion rings at that location, it would change my life. I mean, the real onion rings, not bad. I mean, I'm talking about the onion rings that came from Burke's. But nonetheless, Kev, you've written a book here, and I haven't read the book, and you want me to read the book, and the book just landed on my desk, and I'm in the middle of reading Boomtowns right now because I'm trying to make the city better, and I'm launching a Baltimore Positive initiative with Don Moeller. This may actually be one of our first Baltimore Positive segments because I don't think we're going to talk much about whether the Orioles are going to be good or bad. I'm not going to ask you about your George Steinbrenner elevator spats back when you were covering baseball at the Bergen Record, and our days at the Evening Sun when I was the kid on the scoreboard page and you were the big shot columnist running around to the World Series and bringing me back gifts that I still have, by the way. I found all the gifts you and Rosenthal and Jim Henneman used to bring me, and I was the kid around the office. This is fascinating, dude. I live in the middle of the city. I've lived here 16 years. I don't think there's been anything worse than the riots themselves than the abandonment of the city and the perception of the abandonment around the city. And I live here, and I every day of my life, and I breathe it, and I still believe in Baltimore. That I don't think the ball game was a good idea, Kev, but you've got a book here that's designed to convince me and my wife differently, or maybe not, but to maybe summarize it in a better light a couple of years later?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this. If you go back to that time, Nestor, you'll remember that time clearly. My feeling is, and the feeling of a lot of people is, it was simply too dangerous for the Orioles to have a regular game there. Parts of the city were burning. There was mass rioting. Less than 36 hours before the game, there was looting. The city was simply too dangerous. And they needed to have the police that normally patrol Camden Yards for Orioles games. They needed them in other parts of the city, and they needed them desperately. So this decision to not play a game with fans, to play a game for the first time in Major League history, in a locked stadium with no fans, wasn't just made by the Orioles. It was made by the Orioles, it was made by the police, by the mayor's office, and by the Maryland Stadium Authority, which was responsible for security at both M&T Bank Stadium and Camden Yards. So,
well, I watched the tank circle the city as the game was playing, Kev, so I have a unique view. I live on the 23rd floor, as most people who see my sunrises see. I saw the militiamen with machine guns on every corner vividly. I have pictures of all of that.
Right.
We didn't leave much, and when we did, we went to Reggie's to get a beer for lunch in our barricade and passed soldiers for 4 blocks and then came home, and then they played a baseball game that, quite frankly, they could have canceled, moved, defecated upon, moved to Bowie, moved to Aberdeen, played in D.C., played in Bemidji, played in Chicago, played anywhere, but they didn't have to play the game, but they did. And Kev, my memory of that night is the 6:30 news leading in America with Baltimore being so dangerous that they had to play a baseball game where nobody came. And then the Orioles wonder why nobody's coming to their baseball games now. I'm very disappointed in every aspect of their decision as a taxpayer, as a fan, as a citizen, as an Oriole fan, as someone that loves baseball, as someone that loves Baltimore, as someone that would make a sane decision if I owned a baseball team to say, it's probably not a good look to play a ball game with nobody around. It's probably not good to tell our fans to stay home, but we'll just play it without you today. I mean, come on, Kev, you're around back in 79. You make the magic happen, the magic of Oriole baseball. From your perspective, it's a great story, right? It's a fascinating story as to how this game ever got played. Tell me the basis of you writing the book, because you write a lot of books about a lot of things. Why did this strike you as a book?
It was one of the most surreal experiences the city ever went through, Nestor. And think about what you just said. We had National Guard troops here. We had rioting 10, 12 blocks north of Camden Yards. How could you possibly have a ball game in that stadium? How could you possibly bring people into that stadium? There was no way it could happen.
Then why play the game at all? I guess that's the exploration of, and I know it was a quick decision and whatever and other things. They told me at the time that like Aberdeen and Bowie, the Players Association, there might be rocks on the field and it's not to Major League specification. I hear all that, then they go and play games in like Wembley Stadium. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know why they just couldn't made it free at Bowie and they would have been heroes. I think.
Part of it was a major league schedule. If you miss too many games, you're going to throw that whole schedule off. And remember, they went to Tampa the day after the game and played a 3-game series against the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Orioles were the home team. So I think the logistics of this, it was just impossible to get a game in there. Going to Aberdeen, going to Bowie, just didn't make sense. You couldn't logistically pull it off with 2 major league teams, all the players, buses, managers, flights. You couldn't do it.
You can play the Camden Yards, but you can't put 50 guys on 2 buses and drive them 30 miles away and play a ball game?
No, absolutely
really?
not. You can't do it. You have to play in a major league stadium.
If I would have been mayor, that game wouldn't have happened. You're not going to do that in my city. You're not going to lead the national news on the 2 days after a riot, week after a riot, when there's already tanks circling my building, and you're going to demand that we secure the stadium for no one and lock the doors and then put it on national TV, and that's good for the city? I mean, I have property here. 4 years later, yeah, sure.
You were just saying. Wait a minute. You were telling me that you thought the game should be played. Now, how can you turn around and say that?
If they're going to play the game, there's a million places they could play the game that didn't include within the city limits when there were tanks circling the building. I mean,
Right. It couldn't be done, and that's why they closed the stadium. They freed up all the police. There's usually 3 or 4 dozen policemen who watch over Camden Yards during the game. They freed all those cops up. They locked the gates, and they played the game. But let's get back to the original one of the questions you asked me, and that's why did I want to do a book about this?
Sure.
It was the most surreal thing I'd ever seen, Nestor.
You attended the game, or did you not? Were you there?
Pardon me?
Were you at the game?
No, I did not cover the game.
You see, Luke was at the game. I mean, WNST was represented in the. We covered the game, and there were, I guess, 100 reporters there. Well, I don't know. Maybe your book would cover exactly how many credentials were given away.
Yep, about 110 people in the press box. But the idea, this had never been done before in the history of the major leagues. We're celebrating the 150th year of the major leagues now, the 150th anniversary. This had never been done, and the idea that you would play a game less than 36 hours after the most deadly riots in Baltimore since the Reverend Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, just made, for me, a fascinating topic. And I got to tell you, I'm shocked that I was the only person to do a book on this, because I thought, oh, man, this is so, it's so surreal. It's so historic. It's such a singular event. Other people are going to want to do books about it. Thank God they didn't, and I'm glad. And even if they did do it, my book got out there first, and I'm happy about that.
Kevin Cowherd has been my friend for 4 years, 1986. By the way, I ran into Bob Nusgart's wife at dinner at Ruth's Chris the other night. So Bob Nusgart's still my dear Facebook friend and one of our friends that we go back. I found my sports first pin, by the way, too, Kev. I know you weren't a sports first guy, but many of us, Molly Dunham, a bunch of us were, and it's a tiny little pin. But if I had Dick Girardi on a couple weeks ago, Kevin and I have been at it a long time. He's written books on Ed Hale and all sorts of local issues, amongst other things. And we've talked baseball, we've talked football, we've talked civic issues. The book is When the Crowd Didn't Roar, How Baseball's Strangest Game Ever Gave a Broken City Hope. And that's the word I want to focus on right now. Where's the hope in the game? Well, how did this game that led to 6 o'clock, 6:30 news across the board as, oh my God, the city's so dangerous, they had to play a game that no one could get it. And that's the way it was portrayed by the media. And look, man, I travel the world and stand from Baltimore like you do. Maybe you say you're from Cockeysville, or maybe you say you're from Jersey or New York or whatever, but when people ask me where I'm from, I don't say Dundalk, I say Baltimore. And There's now a snicker, dude. You know what I mean? Like, it's not bad enough being from Dundalk. Now I'm from Dundalk and Baltimore, Kev. What the hell am I going to say I'm from at this point? But, Baltimore has taken a real beating in the aftermath of all of this in so many ways, and it's really pissing me off. And it's one of the reasons Don Moeller and I are getting together to do Baltimore Positive, because I want my wife to be able to walk through the city safely, and I want the city to be vibrant, and I want Light City to work, and I don't want the Preakness to leave, and I don't want the baseball team to leave, and I want the baseball team to be better run, and I want the city to be better run, and I want clean water, and I want safe streets, and I want law and order, and I want all of that stuff. But you said hope from the game. I mean, I'm trying to figure out the value of the Orioles on a global scale at this point, having watched this now, living down here for the last 16 years, and remembering, like you, all that Governor Schaefer had to do, all that Edward Bennett. I mean, you covered all of that from the inside out, Kev. That the baseball team staying here was a little bit miraculous in the aftermath of the Colts leaving, and then luring the Ravens and having 2 Super Bowl parades around here as we exit Joe Flacco. It's been a glorious time for a guy like me, since I was a kid, as you remember, to be talking about sports in Baltimore the last 25 years. I'm wondering what the next 25 look like, and that's probably only going to be as good as the city is, bro, right? I mean, the city needs to come back, and sports was one of the galvanizing efforts, along with Harbor Place and Mayor Schaefer and the Science Center and Johns Hopkins and all the awesome stuff we got here that made Baltimore great to begin with. The baseball thing's important here, man. You know that.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about the hope in that title. The hope, Nestor, was simply that by the end of that day, the peace in Baltimore had held. Okay, so this is April 2015, and within 36 hours of that of the rioting, the game was played. I talk about hope because people said, wow, there's something happening here. There's a baseball game going on here. It's not the normal baseball game, but the city avoided another eruption of rioting. And that's what I talk about. For the first time, so many people like Koise Mfumi, city council people, the police, for the first time, the hope was, yes, the rioting is over. The worst of the rioting is over. The city is not irretrievably broken. We can get on with life. Now, I got to tell you that from that time in 2015, since the Freddie Gray uprising, riots, whatever you want to call it, the city is in a very, very tough spot again. So this hope that I talk about, I'm not talking about something that carried over too long. Obviously, this is a very tough time for the city. But for that day, for the next day, there was hope that the worst of the rioting was over.
Kevin Cowherd has written a book. It is called When the Crowd Didn't Roar, How Baseball's Strangest Game Ever Gave a Broken City Hope. I'm holding the book. David Simon, our one-time compadre and cohort, has called it remarkable. The scenes from it were remarkable, right? Like the picture on the back of no one, right? And look, I can see the gates of the stadium from where I'm sitting literally right now, and I had binoculars and I could see a handful of people sort of pressed up to the gates, you know what I mean, and they showed that sort of in some of the imagery from the television cameras, the sound of the bat, right, the sound of the ball hitting an empty seat and then dribbling, down because there's no one there to fetch the ball. The fact that there was no cheering going on, the fact that anything that was said in the dugout could be heard. I mean, it was almost like a test tube experiment from one of many who watched it on television.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something, the players have all said, and everyone that I spoke to said they've never experienced anything like it. Even at Little League, you got a couple people in the stands, your mom is there, your dad is there, your brothers and sisters. You always had somebody watching you play baseball at every level that these guys play in. And even in the Dominican League, a lot of these guys have played in the Dominican League and played in Venezuela. And even there, in the worst of times when it's hot as hell, it's 98 degrees, it's humid, there's always a few fans. So this was such a surreal experience. And as you were alluding to, the sounds were unbelievable. Outfield, it was so quiet. The outfielders, they couldn't gauge when a ball was hit because every ball sounded like Babe Ruth hit it, and it was going out of the stadium. You couldn't tell. It wasn't the normal sound of baseball, and so it threw off some of the mechanics of these guys. And, of course, you'll remember it was a really quick game between the Orioles and the White Sox, Nestor. 2 hours and 3 minutes, man. Wouldn't we love to have games like that anymore? And, of course, the Orioles jumped on them. It was 6-0 right away, and they eventually won 8-2. So it was a very quick game. And by the way, the players did not enjoy this. Buck Showalter and the Orioles did not enjoy this at all. This was Robin Ventura and the White Sox didn't enjoy it. This was not a fun game to play. It was too surreal. It was too weird. It was too different. Tanks outside, National Guards guys all over the street, news helicopters and police helicopters flying overhead. The weirdest game these guys had ever played, and not a fun, enjoyable experience.
Kevin Cowherd is here, a longtime sports writer, one-time frosted Mick drinker at Burke's and onion ring eater, and I think we had crab melts because that's what I always got there. The book is When the Crowd Didn't Roar, How Baseball's Strangest Game Ever Gave a Broken City Hope. Kev, just a little bit about your career and where you are at this point. I mean, you and I had even talked about writing books on personalities such as I know you did one on Ed Norris, Ed Hale, you've written a variety, Cal, you've done a bunch of different things. Is it one a year? I mean, project level, I talked to John Eisenberg this week, and you author types write them. I write books when I get inspired. I do movements when I get inspired or do segments or whatever. I'm such a writer from the old days like you that I would pump out a book a year every year if someone would give me the chance to do that. And I love writing books and the inspiration to do it and why you still do it and where you're at with what makes you want to write your next book, as an example.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I took a buyout from the Baltimore Sun after 32 years, 6 years ago, Nestor, and since then I've just concentrated on books. It's something I love to do. You get to work at home. You get to go out and interview people. It's still writing, and I know you're a big reader and an appreciator of good writing, and it's just something I plan to do it until they plant me in the ground. But so far it's working out. I like to do fiction and nonfiction. I did 6 books of fiction for young readers with Cal Ripken, and I've done a bunch of other nonfiction books, and it's just something I'm going to continue to do. So this is the latest effort. And so far, so good. I think it's getting a lot of positive reviews, and I'm happy with that, of course.
Yeah, I love when the reading festival comes and we get to walk around the city. I met Maureen McCormick at a book fair in Baltimore. So, when you meet Marsha Brady at the book fair, it makes an impact. But I'm not a Kindle guy. I read on my and I am in the middle of reading Boomtown. I read Astro Ball recently. Best book I've read on sports since Seasons in Hell was a book called The Big Game by Mark Leibovich last year. I've had him on the show a couple of times. I'm doing this Baltimore positive movement, dude. And, one of the things is reading, right? And we have basically an illiterate president of the United States who doesn't read books, who doesn't believe facts, who has, played this Orwellian role for people who have read such then fiction that has now sort of come to life. Dude, I knew the universe was falling apart, and I'm not lying to you. And I don't know that I've said this on the air much, but I'm going to say it right now because I do feel like this is one of our Baltimore positive segments that I'm going to put out. I wrote a book on the Ravens called Purple Rain 2. I wish I had it here. I'd hold it up, and I'd hold it sideways against your book and show everybody that it's a nice thick book. And I took 100 days, literally, of my life after the parade and went to Audubon, New Jersey, and spent 2 days with Joe Flacco. I went to sit with John Harbaugh. I sat with Steve Bisciotti. I sat with other people in the organization who were unnamed, who gave me all sorts of stuff. And Kev, when you're writing a book like that and you're thinking like Super Bowl, and I was at all the games, and I was in New Orleans, and I was in the locker room before the games and after the games and at the press, and I know these guys, you feel like I can write this book. Like I'm good with this. I'll know a lot. And then you sit with Joe Flacco and John Harbaugh, and they tell you stuff that blows your mind that you didn't know. Oh, yeah. And now you start getting stuff, and you're like, oh, holy hell, I got a great book. And I'm putting nuggets out online in the modern era, and I'm selling the hell out of the books, and I'm promising it by Father's Day, and I didn't really get it cleaned up the way I wanted from an editing standpoint, but I published it anyway to get it out for Father's Day because it was like one of these things. And in that week, the Ravens Roost meet in Ocean City. And they have, and I'm sure you've seen this, right? They have a parade. It's unbelievable. Everybody's purple. I've been to 5 of them. They bring players down. 98 Rock goes down there and broadcasts down and all that. And I had my books ready for that. And I thought that was going to be a big sell, right? We write books. I'd like to at least recoup the cost of the book, right? And the 3 months of my life where I widowed my wife, and then she got cancer 8 months later. So, all that. So I go down to Ocean City, and I've got my books, and I'm excited. I got my tent. Brian Billick is my partner on behalf of Living Classrooms. We do all that for the city. And I thought, man, I'm going to sell the hell out of these books. And I, packed them all up, went down to Ocean City. And Kevin, I'm not being mean. I'm being straight. I'm being Baltimore positive, like straight as an arrow. There were 10,000 Raven fans there. I talked to 9,000 of them. 9 out of every 10 walked past me. I sold 38 books. And I sold 38 books because people came up to the book, and unlike your book, and I'm not being even mean to you or whatever, you do have a handful of pictures here in the middle. Like, literally, there are 10 pictures in the middle of your book. I'm holding it up right now. That did not, my book looks like a children's, and Rasig did the cover. It's purple. It's $20. It is what it is, right? It was 400 pages or whatever with all these great stories. And all I heard over and over and over again all day, let me do this for you, Kev. Okay, you ready? Oh, ain't got no pictures in that book. And, I don't read no books. Nasty, I saw the game, and I don't read no books. And, I ain't read no books since, I don't know when the last time I read a book was. And I heard that all day. And I came back, and I told Don Moeller then, I'm like, we're in trouble in this country when all these people who have purple basements, purple trucks, purple flamingos, purple pride, purple passion. They love the Ravens. They love everything about the Ravens. They love autographs. They love games. They love everything about the Ravens. That I write a book on something they might actually read, like Joe Flacco's story and how John Harbaugh wound up here and the story of his brother beating the hell out of him and him beating his brother and his parents and how Ed Reed and Jacoby Jones got to go home and how Ray Lewis disappeared and came back and rode off on, like all of these incredible things that happened with that story. And no one wanted to read about it because I don't read no books. And I thought to myself, Kev, we got problems here. You know what I mean? We're talking education in the country. You're writing books. I'm writing books. That's a big, big mover for me because it really shook me up to see that Ravens fans didn't even want to read about the Ravens because they just don't read. I mean, they have no interest in reading,
It's a sad commentary, buddy, but you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it just the number of readers seems to have diminished, and especially young people. I find that so many young people just don't read the way we used to. So, listen, I can't argue with anything you said. You hit the nail on the head.
For you and talking to people like me, look, man, most of these people are on the Orioles payroll. I'm not being mean, but you talk to Masson, you talk to 105.7, they have to love the Orioles. They're paid to love the Orioles. And I know, you thank John and people inside the organization. Was there anybody you talked to that thought they should have put those men on a bus and gone to Bowie because they put them on a bus and went to the airport. And they could have opened Bowie and been heroes and put a bucket out and raised money for whomever, victim, whatever you wanted to do to help the broken windows, to help the insurance, whatever would have been a cause that they could have played a game and been heroes instead of locking the doors and saying our city's so bad that we have to lock the doors, and we got to get this one in because Buck needs to get this one in. I just remember thinking how absurd it was then. I think it's absurd now. I understand your book better, and I'm certainly going to finger through it, if not read it and argue with you about it later in the summer. But I can't be the only one. Maybe I am because I live here and I looked out the windows and saw tanks and live within that for a while. And if you live in Parkville or Harford County or Carroll County or Cocky, if you live anywhere else but where I live, maybe you see it or felt it differently because it was something you experienced on television you just stayed the hell away from, the way, I stay away from Beirut, let's say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I did not. I mean, I heard from a few fans, but I mean, for the most part, everybody, city officials, the police, the Orioles, the White Sox, Major League Baseball, all thought it was a good move, Nestor. No, I didn't hear. There were a couple of city council members who said, we should have played it. I think their feeling was similar to yours. We should have played it here. I don't believe that. I still, you and I have talked about this for 2 days now, but I still believe that everybody made the right decision. And you touched on something earlier, Nestor, and that was, they were making these decisions on the fly. The Monday game, the day that the rioting started, was the funeral of Freddie Gray. They canceled that game at 5:00 in the afternoon. Tuesday, same thing. City is still too tense. We can't have a game there. Then they just decided late Tuesday to play that game Wednesday behind locked gates. So not a lot of time pressure to get this thing done. So decisions had to be made quickly. I don't fault anybody in this process. I think they did the right thing, as I said, and that's what the book is all about.
The big picture for me is the franchise itself and whatever damage was done throughout the riots and the aftermath. But you live in the county. I'm in the sports space. Kev, everywhere I go, people say, I don't go to Orioles games. Not necessarily because they're losing, not necessarily because Adam Jones isn't there or they suck or I'm mad at Angelo. Whatever your thought would be, they just say, I'm not going into the city to see baseball. And the people who love the Orioles, who live in Pennsylvania, only want to come down during the day and all of that. And I think they did themselves such a disservice. They damaged themselves by playing a game for no one, because people still, years later, believe it's unsafe to be here. And I'm doing everything in my power to try to make it safer or to try to create law and order, to try to create some level of sanity to say you have to come back to the city. Otherwise, the baseball team's going to leave. You have to come back to the city or Reggie's isn't going to be the only place going out of business here. You know what I mean? Like, I live here, I work here, I believe in here, and I don't think they made a good decision. And I don't think, look, they're 25 years into bad decisions, okay? I mean, it is what it is. They've never admitted fault of anything. It's an Angelo trait. They've never said my bad ever on anything they've done, but I really think this is one of those things that on a day-by-day basis, they don't realize that this was a termite kind of event for them to tell fans how unsafe it is here. It's very hard to reprogram that again. Mayor Schaefer went through 10 years of building Harbor Place to make it cool to come downtown again. In the early 80s, it would make it cool for you to take a job at the Baltimore Sun and think that Baltimore wasn't, burned down. I don't know what else to say. And I've been to a lot of cities, Kevin. I know you travel a lot too. Cleveland has improved. Detroit has improved. Pittsburgh's a lovely place, but don't tell anyone. Nashville, Charlotte, these places. And I go other places like San Diego that aren't doing well. I go other places that aren't as good as they used to be. I spent 10 days in Atlanta. I didn't think it was any great shakes. But Baltimore's a place that needs to get better, and I'm committed to doing that, and I'm counting on the baseball team to do more, right? Because I saw that stadium get built, and you saw the pain of getting that built. And I think the baseball team needs to be a huge driver in getting people downtown and making their customers feel like they want to come downtown, not just for a game, but because they love Baltimore, because that was the reason we all fell in love with it to begin with. There was a real provincial thing, and you felt it not being from Baltimore, Kev, right?
Absolutely. Well, listen, I'm applauding all your efforts to get people to come down there, but I'll tell you, they've got to, the perception of the city as being unsafe is what's driving this, and that's got to change. So I'm wishing Mayor Pugh and the police department and the new commissioner, good luck, because you have to change that situation. And, it's been 4 years since the uprising, the rioting of 2015, Nestor, and this city is, the city is still reeling from that, and the city is reeling from a lot of other issues that a lot of cities, face a lot of urban ills. But the one thing they have to do is they have to change the perception of the city as dangerous. And until they do that, I think it's going to be a tough sell to get people to come down there.
Well, Kevin, you remember New York back in the days when you were covering the Yankees, I mean, New York was pretty baudy in the 70s, right? And it took a lot to clean New York up and broken window and all of that stuff, too. So cities get better. They improve. They don't stay bad forever unless the citizens allow that to happen. And I don't want to be a part of allowing that to happen. Dude, I remember when we used to do comedy. We used to break balls around here and have fun. And now it's all serious. When are you going to get back to your comedy writing, man? Let's go make some comedy together, you and me, man.
I think that's what we need, buddy.
All right, I'll put on a funny hat. We bring Rasig. He can draw about it. How about that? All right?
Yeah, that might do it.
Hey, love you, man. Appreciate you. And one day we'll eat Burke's onion rings again. Someone will have that recipe.
Hope so.
And I hope they have really good, thick ketchup, home-style ketchup to go with it.
Absolutely.
Kevin Cowherd, when the crowd didn't roar, how baseball's strangest game ever gave a broken city hope. You can go check it out. It's a real book. Get back to reading, Baltimore. Go read stuff. Kev, I love you, man. Take care of yourself. Good luck with the book.
All right, buddy. Thank you. See you.
Kevin Cowherd can be found out on Twitter and LinkedIn and all sorts of places. He's my Facebook friend as well, and he has been my friend since 1986. So good luck with the book. I feel like that was a spirited debate with both sides of the issue. Point, counterpoint. All we needed was Jane Curtin, I think, to be a part of that. Then it could have been a skit. I could have worn a funny hat. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports and Baltimore positive.